I'm not rooting for any shows to close, but if they do close, I'm gonna laugh at some of those bad decisions. Imagine spending well over a decade trying to turn a beloved 80s tearjerker into a Broadway musical. Then you close in 30 days with the critics saying that your multi-million-dollar sets look like 90s computer screensavers. The 1988 film Beaches is iconic. It is Barbara Hershey and Bette Midler. The wind beneath my wings. You know it. You've heard it. You've probably seen it. Just thinking about it has the average theater goer getting a little misty. But even before the musical, even before the movie, Beaches was a 1985 novel by Iris Rainer Dart. This writer was fiercely, almost to a fault, protective of her original novel. In fact, she actually explicitly stated that the 1988 film adapted by Gary Marshall was not the story that she was trying to tell. The film had made big changes to her blueprint. They changed Birdie's name to Hillary, for one, and tailored the entire project to the star, so suddenly it was the Bette Midler show with a sad best friend. Years later, Dart saw the potential for a chance to restore the original vision, so she became the official writer and lyricist for the musical. The first ever world premiere of Beaches, the movie musical live on stage, was back in 2014. Talk about a different world. In 2014 at the Signature Theater in Virginia, and at that point it was directed by Eric Schaefer. The score was written by a composer named David Austin, and it was made up of essentially modern commercial pop Broadway. Dart was co-writing the book at that time with a playwright named Tom Thomas. The production used 3 sets of actresses, so there was a set of children, a set of teenagers, and then the adult versions of the characters. Not only does this add a lot of people to the cast, but this can ask a lot of the audience. By the time you're interested and attached to the people you're watching, they disappear and never come back. But the run in Virginia went well enough that the producers then turned around and announced a pre-Broadway run for the following year in Chicago. Well, kind of. This is when Shoshana Bean joined as Cece Bloom. And unfortunately, even with her incredible vocals anchoring the show, the critics in Chicago, they weren't into it. They said the pacing was incredibly bloated, there were way too many songs, and the pop score was not working. Some of the reviews even compared it to a ripoff of Wicked.
My first best friend.
After landing with a whimper in the Windy City, fans awaiting the news for the Broadway transfer were met with silence, and in late 2015, co-book writer Tom Thomas passed away. For almost a decade, Beaches went totally dormant, until suddenly it was resurrected in 2024 at Theatre Calgary in Canada. It was a full-on overhaul. Shoshana was out, and Jessica Vosk was in. I can't do it. Lonnie Price and Matt Cowart took over as directors. But the most staggering, unprecedented change was the music. And they brought in the legendary composer Mike Stoller to save the day. He's literally in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He wrote Hound Dog. He wrote Stand By Me. He's 93 years old. So Stoller and Dart sit down and write an entirely new original score that violently shifts the sound away from modern Broadway and into a retro 1950s, 60s feel. After a relatively successful run in Calgary, the producers then set their sights on one of Broadway's weakest seasons for new works ever. A theater was open, and now was their chance, and with such light competition, surely they had a shot at Best Actress, and maybe even Best Musical. Halfway through the season, there were only 2 shows even eligible at the time, so that's why there was a sudden rush of new works that may have not made it to Broadway in another season that suddenly were filling theaters. But Beaches the Musical was about to get beach slapped. It lasted for 28 previews and 38 performances, and and received 0 Tony nominations. On Broadway World, the average score from the critics was a 3.5 out of 10. Instead of building grand physical designs, it relied almost entirely on video projections that were designed by David Bengali. And the critics likened these projections to computer screensavers and clip art. The Times called it a cut-rate roadshow. One viral review stated that the costumes looked like they were off the rack at Sears, and the wigs could be found at Party City. And I'm not sure if it's extra shade that neither of those stores even exist anymore. People dropping $150 on a ticket generally want to see some of that money on stage. The reviews pointed out that the pacing was a disaster. The show was full of constant, abrupt blackouts between very short, fragmented scenes. Plus, we cannot ignore that one of the main highlights of the original film was the soundtrack. It was a jukebox musical, but several tracks were recorded for the film by Bette Midler, and every one of those songs is very well associated with the story. Audiences spending $150 on tickets wanted to hear their favorite songs. The only song that they kept in for Broadway was the finale, The Wind Beneath My Wings. We've gone the whole night with a 50s and 60s retro soundtrack. When I'm with you, my friend. And suddenly jump into a synthesized 1980s power ballad. They really thought they had a cheat code there. Everyone would just leave the show in tears after their favorite song. But you can't just plug in a random song for your 11 o'clock number. That would be like Elphaba singing Memory. Or instead of Jenna singing She Used to Be Mine, she just goes into Xanadu. Now they walk out wishing that the entire show sounded like the last 5 minutes.
You're everything I would like to be.
But perhaps the most glaring issue that the critics pointed out was the incredibly lopsided character dynamic. Once again, highly favoring Cece and shoving Birdie to the side. Jessica Vosk received nearly universal praise. Reviewers basically said she carried the entire show on her back. The Guardian said that it was like watching a brilliant Bette Midler tribute act delivered by Vosk. Then you look over at Kelly Barrett, who played Birdie. Barrett is a phenomenal Broadway talent of her own. But reviewers pointed out that she was just trapped in a passive role. And I just can't ignore that because you have a show that is performatively championing female friendship and empowerment while literally sidelining its co-lead to make room for a diva character. Well, after the abrupt closing, producers have announced that a national tour will launch in 2027. So keep your eyes out. But don't hold your breath. Imagine having $8 million to blow on your dream project. You hire Pulitzer winners. You hire Tony winners and Hollywood legends to help adapt one of the most beloved movies of all time for the Broadway stage. It's a sure thing, but the result is a production so profoundly disastrous that what they make plays for only 5 performances before completely imploding. I'm talking about the spectacular failure of the 1993 adaptation of The Red Shoes. And of course, thanks to this person for the suggestion. You're cool. The 1948 film The Red Shoes is loosely based on a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. It follows the story of a young ballerina who is discovered and then aggressively molded by the ruthless director of a ballet company. They are putting on a new production, which follows a dancer who finds these magical red shoes, and they give her superhuman dancing abilities. Of course, there's always a catch, so once you put those damned red shoes on, you can never take them off. So she keeps going and going and going until she dies. The young composer of the show within the show falls in love with Victoria, and they begin a romance together. But this infuriates the director, and this leads to him giving her a heartbreaking ultimatum. She must choose either the romance or the ballet. The film's central conceit is that performance is not just a hobby, but it really is the dictator director demanding everything from you, even your entire life. So at the climax, climax, Victoria is unable to make this choice, and this leads to her jumping from a balcony and in front of a train. When her body is found, she is wearing the red shoes, manifesting the curse of the ballet into her own real life. And what cemented this movie in the history books was mainly the 17-minute ballet sequence. They wanted it to be a very surreal experience where you're essentially in the main character's head. So as she starts to hallucinate, you see her reflection move without her, and you see people start to morph. A dude turns into a celluloid drawing, and then he turns into a bunch of newspapers. So it's very dreamlike and hallucinatory and disorienting. It's a sequence that by definition requires filming and editing to exist. Weirdly enough, it actually flopped when it opened in London, but then it was selected to be the first movie screened at the New National Theatre in Washington, D.C., and after that it opened in Manhattan, where it was such a freaking success that it ran continuously for over 2 years straight. So if the main draw is a sequence that requires a camera and editing and optical illusions and impossible staging, who the hell is trying to put that on a proscenium stage? A man named Martin Starger. He was a massive fan of the original movie and truly believed with unwavering conviction that he could recreate that magic on Broadway. And he was willing to bet $8 million of his own money on it. Must be nice. So he's got the money, he's got the passion. Now he just needs the team. First, he hires Jules Stein to write the new music, who by this point had composed around 2,000 songs, including some iconic ones.
A kiss on the hand. But diamonds are a girl's best friend.
This was the man behind Everyone's Coming Up Roses and Don't Rain on My Parade. But this was also a man who was now 87 years old. So when he came on board, he saw this project as his swan song and pulled inspiration from the sweeping classical music of the original movie. For the book, Starger hired Marcia Norman, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner at the time, for a little play called Night Mother. She had also just won the Tony 2 years prior for writing the book for the Secret Garden musical, which was directed by Susan Schulman. Schulman ended up coming on board as well as the director, and this was a big deal. She had just been handpicked by Stephen Sondheim to direct the 1989 revival of Sweeney Todd. So obviously we've got our dream team now. All we've got to do is get them in a room together and the magic will happen, right? They realize very quickly that they're trying to make two different projects. On one side, you've got the producer and composer who are interested in a reproduction of the movie, a grand romantic tragedy about the fatal obsession we can have with our art. And on the other side of the room, we have the director, the book and lyrics writer, and set designer Heidi Landsman, who found the source material to be dated and problematic. They wanted to critique the male characters and reframe Victoria's final act as a horrible, tragic result of a woman being psychologically manipulated and emotionally abused. So if both of these ideas could have worked separately, it seems like trying to keep everyone happy was what led to the beginning of the end. 2 months before the show is set to open, Starger sees his money going up in flames and he panics. He fires the director, the production manager, and several cast members. Starger turns to Hollywood for his new director, and he hires
Stanley Donen,
the director behind iconic movies like Singin' in the Rain, On the Town, and 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. And though he only had one theatrical credit to his name, it was a big one. Dancing in the chorus of Pal Joey when he was 16 years old. Stage directors know how to use blocking, choreography, and lighting to guide the audience. And maybe even more importantly, they know how to find the pace of a show without being able to edit in post. Suddenly, Marcia Norman's book and lyrics don't make any sense with all the changes. So Starger brings in one of Stein's collaborators from Funny Girl, Bob Merrill. And when I say brought in, I mean that he agreed to work on the project only if he could stay home in California. Let's not forget that this was a little bit before FaceTiming and Zoom calls. They're literally calling this man and playing the melodies for him over the phone. He would whip up some new lyrics from California and fax them back to the rehearsal room in New York. Neither Marcia or Bob wanted credit for the final lyrics, so they invented a fake name, a pseudonym, Paul Stryker, to print in the programs, which I'm sure made Starger feel really great about his huge investment. The show was housed at the Gershwin Theater, which has over 1,900 seats. And for the last few decades, it's been home to a little show called Wicked. The massive theater, the massive set, the team changes and delays meant that this show had no financial buffer. These delays caused the show to put on 51 previews, which I believe to this day would still put it in like the top 5. Reviews were universally negative, and they tore apart the performances. 3 days after opening, the production shuttered for good on December 19th. By refusing to commit fully to either vision, they made a show that satisfied no one. It was aesthetically beautiful, but structurally and emotionally hollow. Like me.
Here comes the money.
Here we go.
The Queen of Versailles. It had legendary talent, an A-list creative team, an acclaimed documentary as its source material, and a staggering budget of almost $30 million. The 2012 documentary film, also called the 2012 documentary film, also called The Queen of Versailles, was directed by Lauren Greenfield. It follows the lives of billionaire timeshare king David Siegel and his wife Jackie. This couple is on a quest to build the largest single-family private home in America. Very relatable. A 90,000 square foot, $100 million replica of the French Palace of Versailles, in a swampy gated suburb outside of Orlando, Florida. We're talking about
2 tennis courts,
30 bathrooms,
full-size baseball field,
10 kitchens, 90,000 square feet.
right in the middle of this massive construction project.
We're on top of the world.
The mortgage crisis decimates the timeshare industry, and construction on this massive new home comes to a grinding, screeching halt. The documentary ends with Jackie wandering around, holding on to her former life fantasy, while David is locked in his office, ignoring his family completely, and the house is half finished, sitting like decaying ruins. Jump forward a decade, and Stephen Schwartz looked at this biting examination of the American dream and said,
"The wizard will see you now!"
And this was especially epic because Stephen Schwartz was set to reunite with Kristen Chenoweth for the very first time since they did Wicked 20 years ago. Joining her as David Siegel would be Academy Award winner F. Murray Abraham. The initial capital raised by investors just to get to opening night was estimated to be between $22 and $27 million. In this 2.5-hour show, Kristen Chenoweth alone had 23 costume changes. That is a costume every, 6 minutes? So when you have a physical production of this magnitude, the logistics of simply moving the pieces and getting the cues on time and getting 23 quick changes done, all of that ends up halting rehearsals for days, which burns through tens of thousands of dollars in rent payments and salaries for all of the artists. So Act 1 focuses primarily on the rise of Jackie Siegel to try and build empathy and get the audience on her side. We see her escape an abusive first marriage and win the Miss Florida beauty pageant. And then she has a chance encounter with David Siegel, the billionaire, and they have a lavish wedding ceremony complete with a singing Elvis impersonator. But then the show introduces a bizarre parallel narrative, layering the actual 18th century French court of Versailles over the modern day story. So we're suddenly hanging out with Marie Antoinette and King Louis, who sings a song about the power and ego required to build a palace called Because I Can. The set shifts, and we're at the construction site of the mansion, where Jackie now sings a mirrored version of the song called Because We Can. in case you were worried about there being any subtlety. They were trying to blend historical politics with a modern story, but without any real narrative cohesion. Act 2 opens, and we shift focus to follow Jackie's eldest daughter from her previous marriage, who is named Victoria. She is severely depressed and facing addiction and body image issues. And then she dies of a drug overdose. It's a horrible tragedy that actually happened in 2015, but can we talk about whiplash? What exactly was the show trying to say? Is it a campy comedy or a devastating family tragedy, or is it a political satire? The original documentary worked because it was neutral and cynical and had at least some level of objective distance. But a commercial Broadway musical built around a massive, beloved star like Kristen Chenoweth traditionally would require a likable protagonist, especially when said musical is also produced by said main character. The script tries to present her as this plucky, relatable underdog, like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. The problem here is that Jackie Siegel is a living person. There's no possible way to write a biting, objective satire of American excess if the ultimate goal is to serve as a sympathetic vanity project for the very person embodying that excess. And crucially, Jackie experiences these life-altering, massive events, and she doesn't change at all or learn anything from them. But what about that music? Well, if you saw Wicked for Good, then you probably know that Stephen Schwartz is not exactly operating on the same level that he used to be. The score received very mixed reactions. It did not have any soaring, earworm melodies that he's been famous for in shows like Wicked and Pippin. And it had some truly baffling choices. In the midst of the second act, there is a song dedicated to the discovery that the kids forgot about their pet lizard and let it die. And it's an especially baffling choice if you have seen the original documentary, because then you know that this situation did actually happen, but it wasn't a lizard that they neglected. It was the family dog.
So he had her stuffed for me.
Really sympathetic folks we got here.
And this one, a staff member ran over him in the driveway. He's on my piano.
I'm going to use Stephen Schwartz's own philosophy against the show. He's somewhat famous for having a strict list of rules for musicals. Rule number 2 on the list is literally, why should the audience care? If the audience, paying $200 a seat, finds the characters fundamentally unlikable, if they are hoarding wealth while the rest of the country suffers, and they learn nothing from their tragedies, can even a phenomenal performance from Kristen Chenoweth actually save this show? Summer of 2024, the show has an out-of-town tryout in Boston. Reviewers and audiences alike responded negatively. The show was 3 hours long, but despite clear feedback from Boston, the show transferred to Broadway the following fall without making any major changes. And by the time the show hit Broadway in late 2025, it was well known that the Siegels are proud financial supporters of Donald Trump. Then Kristen Chenoweth revealing herself to be a supporter was the cherry on top. And Toilet Paper USA opposed the very existence of many people in the target audience of this show. And just like that, there was a massive organized boycott of the production, with many people refunding their tickets. And this may have been the final shot in the neck for the show.
In the sense that
during the first few weeks of previews, with all the initial hype, it actually was pulling in over $1 million a week. But as the controversies grew and the reviews came out, grosses capsized and fell to just about $600K a week. If your nut, and that's what they call it, the nut, if your nut is $900K and you're bringing in $600K, that means that you're losing $300,000 in investor money every week just to keep the lights on. Almost a third of the seats were empty, and ticket prices were slashed down from over $200 to $73. The producers faced a dire choice, and they decided that there was no time to wait it out for a miracle. They announced a closing date of January 2026, but remember when Phantom announced it was closing and a huge surge of ticket sales saw them extend a couple of times? Well, the opposite happened here, and the January closing date was moved up to December 21st, 2025. The Queen of Versailles was demolished after 32 previews and 49 performances, resulting in a 100% total loss. $30 million wiped out because of misreading the cultural moment, and a total failure to see what made the original source material a success. The Queen of Versailles serves as a profound, extremely expensive cautionary tale about the limits of star power and the danger of ignoring foundational, structural narrative flaws in favor of visual spectacle. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure to let me know what you thought in the comments, and like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you again soon.